Thanks, Jim. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'll always hate following Director Clapper. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Keith and the whole U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Foundation and the staff for inviting me here. It's a rare treat for me to be able to speak about the National Reconnaissance Office in a forum like this. While I hate following Director Clapper in a speaking engagement, I do love working for him. Earlier you heard him joke about being a geezer, but the geezer characterization would never occur to anyone who sees the passion and the energy he brings to a tough job every day. It's fantastic for everyone in the AIC that he has been willing to stay in that difficult job for as long as he has. He's made a huge difference in the way the community behaves and in what it can do. As an agency director, it's really wonderful to have a boss who understands and appreciates what your agency does for the community, and one that you know will stand behind you personally. Although after he sees my first few slides, that may change for me. He is gone, right? Yeah. If very few would ever call him a geezer, there is no one who knows him that would ever characterize him as poker-faced. He is very transparent, very expressive. You know what he's thinking, and you always know where you stand. And in fact, you don't have to work for him very long before you can interpret the different faces of Director Clapper. Now, this is a face you see a lot when he's on Capitol Hill, especially when he's testifying in an open forum. Clearly not a happy face. This is his earnest, let me be specific face. I saw this face a lot when I was at USDI. This is a face you see right before the boss gets up and walks out, when you're still talking. I understand that Kevin Miners sees this face a lot. And of course, this is a face we see whenever he comes out to the NRO for a program update. Because despite what he says, he likes NRO best. Sorry, Robert. Now, it's been his passion for the mission and for the people of the IC that's made him stick with us. But he'd be the first to admit, and he did last year, that his favorite libation has also helped him make it through nearly 5 years as DNI. And I've noticed that one of these is waiting for him wherever he goes. Now, some of you may remember last year when I showed a picture of Kevin Miners. In fact, for some of you, that's the only thing you remembered about my speech from last year. And many of you may have been here early in the week when Kevin showed a picture. It was rather a pitiful attempt at payback. I say pitiful because it was a shameful copy of what I did last year, absolutely showing no imagination. And pitiful because those of you who know Stephanie O'Sullivan know that sucking up would only irritate her. Even Kevin realized this, eventually. But knowing that Kevin tried his pitiful best, some of you may be wondering if that prior reference to Kevin is all I plan to do in response. And the answer to that would be no. If this is Director Clapper with his favorite libation, this next slide shows Kevin in his best imitation of the boss look. And of course, he doesn't quite pull it off. There's also the noticeable difference in the size of the glass. Yes, it's Kevin who can walk away from any event with joint awards, the one for sucking up and the one for sucking down. But I will say, as much as I love teasing Kevin, and as much as I hate complimenting him, his tribute to our friend and colleague, Gina Lundy, was very well done. Very classy. And now I'm going to go from that classy act to a real class act that I'll always remember, and that's my grandfather. My grandfather was born before the turn of the 20th century. He fought in World War I, the war to end all wars, and then saw his son go off to fight in World War II. He weathered the Great Depression in between those two world wars, and he witnessed all the change that followed. As a kid, I remember him telling me stories about the many changes he'd seen during his long life, but he'd also talk about one constant, and that was human nature. My grandfather had been a farm kid who later went on to own and run hardware stores in cities. And he would coach people through plumbing and other household repair things, and he showed great patience as he did that. But he dealt with a lot of people, a whole lot of human nature, on a daily basis for many, many years. And based on all that experience, he used to tell me two things. The first is that common sense isn't really very common. And the second is that conventional wisdom is often not very wise. So I thought this morning I might take on a couple of the conventional wisdoms I hear about NRO. The first is that we only do one size, big, and that we only have one speed, and that's slow. Not true. The NRO builds systems to satisfy mission requirements that come from the community. Contrary to popular belief, we don't generate these inside the NRO. Now, sometimes a mission requires a bigger payload and a bigger system, and sometimes it requires something smaller and more distributed. But we do it all, from systems the size of a desktop printer to those much larger, again, depending on what the mission requires. And we aren't slow. We've launched new systems in under 2 years. And yes, we've done it more than once. The timeline on our larger systems is longer, not so much because that's what the system requires, but because that's what we can afford in the near term, and because continuity in the factory helps for longer-term affordability. This slide gives you an idea of the variety of sizes and timelines we support. And yeah, I know there's no numbers on either of the axes, but the dots are relative to each other. And you see a lot of variety in both the weight and the time. The timeline on any acquisition effort is also affected by the help we receive. And I mean helps in terms of both dollars and help in terms of oversight. I realize that acquisition oversight is just a fact of life, particularly for the NRO. We have about 2/3 of all the major system acquisitions in the IC. So we know we'll get special attention from both the OD&I and from the AT&L staff in the Pentagon. As you can see, most of our programs are green for cost and schedule. And they've been that way for about 5 years now. So I'm hoping that as we continue to perform, we can get a little more help on the dollar side and a little less help on the acquisition oversight in the future. The second piece of conventional wisdom is related to the first. Some folks think the NRO has lost its innovative spirit and that we just keep building the same things over and over again. In fact, they think that's how we're getting to this green acquisition scorecard. It's not true, but in this case, some of the misimpression is partly our fault. We do like to stick with the same name for our space systems, but there are usually a lot of differences behind that unchanging nameplate. Mr. Bob Brodowski and Dr. Susan Durham lead my very talented R&D team. They are experts at developing the new technology that leads to revolutionary increases in mission performance. They also mature that technology to help reduce risk. By the time they transfer new technology to my space and ground programs, I've got the best of both worlds. I've got revolutionary new capability, and I've got low to medium acquisition risk. Let me give you an example. The last satellite we launched had the same name as its predecessor, but it was nearly 90% different in terms of technology. And let me add, despite all that innovative change on board, it delivered well ahead of independent cost and schedule estimates. There's another green program on our acquisition scorecard. And one other point on the NRO R&D program. It doesn't just enable new mission capability, it enables new mission capability with improved affordability. That role for R&D has always been important, but it's become absolutely critical to surviving in today's budget environment. Some might think we have to give up capability to improve affordability. I don't believe we do, and I don't believe we should. I don't need to remind this audience that the world is a dangerous place and that space is more important to the U.S. than ever. The Deputy Secretary of Defense mentioned that when he spoke here, and that's a point we're going to come back to later. The final piece of conventional wisdom I'll mention is also related. There's an impression that the NRO doesn't compete our contracts. that we just keep going back to our same small set of providers with sole source awards. Again, I'll admit there's a kernel of truth there. We don't always compete our major systems at the system level, although we do whenever the mission of the technology has changed enough to justify that. As a matter of fact, we just finished a competition on one of our major space programs. But we routinely compete the new technology under that satellite nameplate, new ground and transport capabilities, and all services, from engineering assistance to the financial audit support that's helped to enable 6 clean audits in a row. These add up to an ever-increasing and pretty respectable percentage of our total contracts, as you can see from this slide. So far, what we've talked about is what we're not, and I want to now talk about what we are, and more importantly, where we're headed. The NRO continues to provide the intelligence and defense communities a unique perspective, the global reach, and the flexibility enabled by space-based access. Others who operate on the ground or in the air just don't have the perspective offered by space, where I can see a third of the globe with just one vehicle. Others in the IC have a global presence, but they have to pick the places to put their assets. If they choose wrong, recovery, moving their assets, isn't an easy, a quick, or a cheap thing to do. And anybody who watches the news knows that high interest areas for the community can shift rapidly, and they can shift frequently. Fortunately, the NRO can focus its assets anywhere, anytime, at the speed of tasking. We can be there until others arrive, and we can stay focused as long as necessary. So that worldwide reach with flexibility is what makes us unique within the intelligence community. And we need to perform that unique role even better in future, which is exactly what we plan to do. We plan to deliver better capabilities in space and on the ground. That's not new. We've always used new technology to do better against requirements. The focus on resiliency is new, or at least newer. Let me talk about each of these briefly. The community needs, so we want to build even more capability in space. And I'll offer 2 specifics: improved sensitivity and greater persistence. First, sensitivity. Even maintaining the sensitivity we have in orbit today gets challenged more frequently these days. For example, folks on the Hill will tell me they don't own a camera anymore. They just use their cell phones. Well, so do I. But cell phones are not what professionals use. And you can see that fact whenever you go to a sporting event. You go to any game, and you see big cameras up high to get perspective, and to tip and cue those down low. And you see big cameras down low getting the detail that those sports analysts want to see. A high-low combination working together. Sounds like an idea. Persistence. We have some persistence today, but it sort of looks like this. Staking out a bank when you suspect it might be robbed, but blindfolding your stakeout team. If the thief's quiet, he gets away. Clearly, this is not sufficient, and most folks agree to that. The argument then is how to improve, and it devolves to a stare versus a swarm approach. This is what the choice looks like. The swarm approach offers real potential in change detection, and we must take full advantage of that potential. But the stare approach gives you a much better chance of staying on a specific target, which is why the DC Metropolitan Police Department uses a helicopter to track a suspect. They don't use a suite of airplanes, swoop them down and forth. The helicopter, able to dwell and stare, is not only more effective, but more efficient for that mission. We all remember this scene, brought to us courtesy of OJ, a police helicopter, and a camera. The stare approach also provides a flexibility to change your revisit rate or stare as your target demands. With the swarm approach, you have a revisit rate determined by physics, not by the target. We need space-based capabilities that provide the flexibility consistent with our unique role in the IC, the capabilities necessary to hold multiple mobile targets at risk. Ground. Ground systems we're building today allow capabilities that could not have been imagined just a few years ago. Sentient, a thinking system that allows automated multi-int tipping and queuing at machine speeds, is just one of those. NRO advances on the ground are recognized by the community, but we have a lot more work to do. I know my ground team, led by Mr. Mike Halen, working in partnership with folks at NGA and NSA and leveraging eyesight, are going to get us there. Finally, resilience. Thanks to Dr. Stuart Cameron, my director of the NRO Survivability Assurance Office, we're also very focused on increasing the resiliency of the NRO architecture. And we continue to make huge investments to that end. Huge investments in a tough budget environment, so you know it's a priority for us. There's an NRO culture change behind it. From 5 years ago, no NRO program manager would have put $1 into resilience that could have been put into mission capability. Now my program managers realize that $1 spent on resilience is $1 put into mission capability, and a mission capability that can survive against space-based and ground-based threats. I know that congressional members are concerned about the resilience of U.S. space systems, as are seniors in both the OD9 and the DoD. This is one of those fantastic moments in government when the intelligence, defense, and congressional communities are all working to solve a very difficult problem together. Those of you who might have attended the recent Space Symposium in Colorado might have heard the Deputy Secretary of Defense speak there. Some have described the speech as a call to arms. It was certainly a call to action. The "we must act" piece is pretty clear. And he echoed some of those same themes here. The NRO took that call very seriously. While we have been making changes toward improved resiliency, we decided to propose a more fundamental shift in one of our next generation systems, with its first name being resiliency. We took that proposed change forward, and we got this response. Looks like the cultural change hasn't quite spread to every place it needs to yet. But improved sensitivity and persistence in space, a smart ground able to take full advantage of that space capability, and the architectural resiliency necessary to sustain mission in a threat environment, that's where the NRO is headed. Progress against our goals will require help from our partners in the executive branch and on Capitol Hill. This is a team sport. It will also very much depend on the performance of our industry partners. The NRO doesn't build much of anything without our partners in industry. We want partners who are as committed to national security and our mission as we are. That's important to us. We also want industry partners to deliver on their commitments, just as the Congress expects that of us. That said, bad things happen to good programs and good people, and we know we're no exception to that rule. But we want to know immediately. Bad news never gets better with age. Again, the Congress expects that of us, and we expect it of all the teammates who work with us. We also want a CEO-level commitment and support to success, including application and corporate resources when it's required to stay on schedule or cost. And finally, for all of you in industry, I want you to tell me how you're going to help with our intelligence challenges, not why I should buy the system you've got ready to sell me. Generally, our industry partners do all of these things very, very well. Every green on that acquisition scorecard and every mission success in the field is a tribute to all our NRO teammates, and we very definitely count our industry partners as teammates. Before I end with a short video that illustrates the unique role of the NRO and the reasons we continue to strive to do better, I want to thank all of you for taking some time this morning to challenge a little conventional wisdom about the NRO, and for partnering with all of us as we move forward to protect and defend this great nation. Thank you.
was great.
Oh, thanks.
You stay at the podium.